So, ladies, do you want to learn about putting borders on quilts?
No, we want to talk some more. Just kidding.
So here's this quilt that I made the other day for you. And let's start from the beginning. This time I'm going to put the pieces together and get it up to the point of binding. But so these are our 5 pieces. They're about 13 by 10 and a half. And a lap quilt would be about 50 by 65. So we're going to work to get to that point. At 10 and a half, if I put them 3 tall, would be 31 inches, and 3 across. So 3 times 13 would be 39. So that'll give me some idea. This is the design we put together. And so the first step is to get to that point. So I organized some colors that I thought would complement. And this decided to work them out and made these squares to be about the right size. I made 2 pointing left and 2 pointing right so that they would fit in this arrangement. And now we're ready to assemble it. So this becomes the tricky part that I call framing. And Leah said the other day, it's just like doing a picture, and that's true. So it's exactly the thought process that you go through in framing out each of these blocks. So here I needed to make this exactly the same size as my design, the pieced blocks. And these are our panels. And we're going to assemble them into rows. But the first part here is making this little frame. So I'm adjusting the sizes. And I always do 2 sides at the same time, so I'm sure that these are exactly the same. Because part of what we're trying to do is make sure that they're squared up, that they're perfect rectangles. And we can assemble them as perfect rectangles. So we'll cut 2 exactly the right size and put those on, and then we'll do the other 2 sides, the 2 opposite sides. So here's what I do. I'm cutting the 2 pieces exactly the same at the same time so I don't mess up and do it accidentally wrong. And now I'm going to pin the ends. I always start pinning at the ends. I want it to be exactly this length. And the reason for that is this piece now, it's going to be stretchable. So you don't want it to stretch one way or the other. If you just start at one end and don't pin and just run along, it will be different. I promise. Okay? Because this is stretchy and this edge is stretchy, especially if this is a bias edge. If it's cut, diagonally, then it's very stretchy. So it's very important to work to the size at this point. Now I lay it out flat. Go ahead. Somebody had a question.
Yeah, this is Jenna. I was just wondering, like, you measure in the middle and take that dimension, or the middle of the panel and take that dimension for the length, or do you do like 2 measurements and then take the average? What kind of technique?
Yes. Well, for this one, yes, you would measure both ends. It's such a small piece, I don't know that I would do the middle, but when we get to the quilt, you'll see I measure down the middle. I'll show you that. Okay, so here I pin the ends first, then I lay it out flat, then I put this middle pin in. So that's pin number 1. And then I'd add another pin in the middle. So what I'm doing is sort of splitting the difference. From end to end, this is the middle. From here to here, this is the middle. Now I'm going to put another pin on over there. And now that I've got all 4 sides done and pressed, and pressing becomes very important here. If I hadn't pressed this side one, then this joint might have gotten messed up when I put this across it. So you want everything nice and flat. So ironing is important. And now we have them exactly the right size, and we can put them together. So I've got this row together and I put some sashing in between. So it increases the width a little bit and also sets off the designs a little bit better. Now I've got 3 rows assembled. And now we need to assemble it. But part of the trick for this quilt is we need this 3 panels to be exactly vertically aligned. And that's the tricky part, because here we don't have a seam to help us across this sashing. We need to go across the sashing and make sure that these panels are exactly aligned. So how are we going to do that? So the first thing I did was to measure it. And what I do when I'm measuring a big piece is I fold it in half and measure. So this is 19. So my total width of this edge is how much?
19.
19?
So 8.5.
My total width, if I were to unfold this from here to this corner, is going to be how much? If half of it is 19, then the whole width is 38.
36. Okay.
19 plus 19 is 38.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, get out your math skills, gals. Okay, so I measure it in half, and the reason for that is I'm usually working in a smaller space, and this particular mat is 36 inches long, but it's only 36 inches long. So notice that 38 would have been longer than my mat. So if I just measure the 19 and double it, that's okay. So similarly, I can take the sashing piece that I'm going to cut and measure that in the same way. So I'll fold the sashing piece, make sure I cut the open end, don't cut the folded end or you wind up with 2 pieces, but you want to cut the length of this, either lay it out completely if you can, or just double it up. All right, so now I've got the sashing piece. Again, I'm pinning it ends first. This is a longer piece because it's that row of 3, right? So what I did was I marked the center of my sashing piece and I marked the center of my quilted piece. And now I'm going to line those 2 pins. That's my middle. Now that I've done that, I have a smaller piece to work with, and so I'm going to continue to put pins in, splitting the difference between this point and the right-hand end of the quilt, and then divide it up again. Just keep doing your pins that way. Always go to the middle of the space that you're dealing with. And keeping it lying flat on a table is very good. Don't try to do it in the air or on your lap. It's better to do it on the ironing board or the table, some flat surface, and let the fabric kind of relax. Like I'm doing here, I've got it laid out, but I'm not pulling it at all because this strip will stretch. This one less so, but every time you have a joint, that also can stretch. So you want things to lie down, be pressed. So ironing is important, and then you'll go across it. So here I am. I've put the pins in, splitting the difference across. And any sort of sensitive places, like these points, I've put a pin in those to make sure that they don't move too much in one direction or another. Okay. All right, now I'm going to mark the alignment points. That's what I call them. So here I'm using my ruler to make sure I'm coming straight. And I'm taking, this is a ballpoint pen, which isn't the very best thing to use, but I do it sometimes. Pencil works great. A little wax pencil is perfect. But make sure that whatever mark you make stays in that seam allowance. That's why it's just a little bitty thing. But here, I've made sure with my ruler, I've made sure I'm coming in a straight line to
Yeah.
this point. And I marked this point too, because I wasn't sure which one was going to be more useful in aligning these. Okay. And now I'm going to take those points and align them with the seams. And it turned out this is going to be the one that works better. You can see here's this line coming in, this line coming in, and we've marked the points, so now we're sure it's going to be perfect. And we'll put them together and pin it and sew it. And then press all your seams flat. See, every seam is flat. So I press this out, lay them nice and flat, sew across it. You see why that becomes so important? So use that iron.
It seems like it has to fit in like a puzzle in
Yes.
my mind.
Exactly. That is exactly the principle. And here you can see this is the point that we aligned. Those seams are right across from each other.
Yeah, it must have skipped.
And there it is. So we've got, this is what I call the design area. So this is your design area that's going to sit on top of your mattress. And now we're going to go and build out from there. So we've got these along the side. I put the same sashing width on the edges that is in the middle. Okay. Questions up to here? Good.
No, but I love the colors. I
I
love
do too.
So now comes the fun part.
Sure.
So now we're going to say, what sashing do we want? And so I laid out a bunch of colors that I thought might work. This is the same as this sashing that's already there. This is the same as this bit. This is the same as that bit. And the gold is the same. So, but I've added a couple of other maybes.
No, it's too hard.
So we could do like that, or maybe like that.
Oh, I like that. The third one there with a little, yeah, design down there. Do you all like that? I like that.
So we have one vote for 3. So you can see I'm playing with it and I'm just stacking the fabrics. And I've been known to do that even in the store. Just sort of lay them out and say, what do I like? What works with my eye? Works with my panels, picks up these colors, picks up the colors from the piece blocks.
You know why? You're a professional.
That's right.
She is.
And
And
being
this
a Aquarian, you're very different than anybody else in the old zodiac.
So I played with this one, but I decided it was not helpful to add another color. That I like staying with these colors better. There was enough variation in the panels that I thought keeping these consistent would be better.
I agree. Thumb down on my side for 1 and 2.
Okay. So yeah, and 3 is the one I picked, Leah. We're on the same wavelength. Okay, so we're going to use that same framing method that we did before. Mark the middles so that you can shorten your piece. We're going to cut them exactly the way we did before. First we have to decide what finish side we want to be and how we want to get there. So currently this piece is 40.5 by 46. And a lap quilt is usually somewhere between 45 by 60, along in there. Wheelchair size might be a little bit shorter. And if you're making a sofa quilt for a large man, don't forget he needs to cover his feet. So, if he's 6 feet tall, then it needs to be longer, right? So you kind of decide based on who's going to be getting the quilt, what circumstances, and so forth. So what I decided to do here was add 2 borders and aim for about 44 by 55. So the first thing I did was to measure the side edges for this. And the way you do that is first you measure one side, and as Janet said, you measure the other side, and then you also measure down the middle, and they're usually a little bit different. So in this case, I said one's 46, one's 45 3/4, one's 46 1/4. So what are we going to declare to be the real size of this quilt?
But depends on which would be easier to fix, to go down, to upgrade or downgrade.
1/4 of an inch, you can go in either direction because, as I already told you, things are a little stretchy. So 1/4 of an inch is not a problem. So what would you do? So here, if I sort of average them out, 46 is the one. This is a 1/4 inch bigger. This is a 1/4 inch under. Cool, we can deal. So we're just going to make them both 46. Okay, and that means that one of them is just going to get eased into 46 and not 46 1/4. Easily doable. Okay, if the difference is much bigger than that, you do have a different kind of an issue, but usually it's about a 1/4 of an inch different if you've been paying attention to the squares. And keeping your seam allowances consistent. That's the other major piece. The cutting and the consistent seam allowances. So now we've got two opposite borders. We cut two pieces 46 inches long. And to add a 1 inch border, we're going to cut 1.5 inches wide. So this gold strip would be cut at 1.5 by 46. And again, you're going to pin it middle, ends first, then the middle points, then split the difference as you go. Okay, and I mentioned before, I cut large pieces by folding it in half and multiplying it. So if I want a 46, I'm going to cut this strip folded with this end at 0 and the open end stacked up neatly. I just did it this way so you can see that it's folded in half. But when these are perfectly aligned and this is at 0, then I'll make a cut at 23, which gives me 46. Okay? And be sure to cut the open end, not the fold, or you wind up with 2 pieces, and then you get to put it together and figure out how to recover that 1/2 inch. So yeah, don't do that. And just let the fabric relax. You don't want to stretch it, or it won't be 46. It'll really be something a little bit different. Okay, so again, now we're going to measure for this top edge. Okay, and again, we're going to do it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And the reason you do that is to make sure that it's going to be a perfect rectangle. So in this case, we got a little difference again. So this one's a little over, this one's a little under. Let's make it 43. So cut 2 opposite side borders at 43. And I want them to be, again, 1.5 inches wide by 43 long. So note that the width has grown by the addition of the first 2 side borders. So you don't take the original measurement we did of the green, because it's not just green anymore. It's green plus this gold, right? So every time you measure this is going to be a little bit different. That's fine. You can do the calculations if you want to, just to double check yourself. But this is the way it's gone. It used to be 40.5, but now we've added the borders, and I should have done the raw for you. So you added 1.5 inch strip, right? We cut it at 1.5 inches. So we've added basically 3 inches, but 40.5 would be wider than that, but you're going to lose a 1/2 inch every time you have a seam, right? You lose for the seam allowance. You've taken a 1/4 inch off the green, a 1/4 inch off the gold. So every time you have a seam, you've lost a 1/2 inch. So don't rely on your calculation, just measure it again. It's too confusing to do the math all the time.
Mind-boggling.
No, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to measure the side length again. And because we've already squared it up, we're pretty confident that this gold now is a nice, perfect rectangle. So you can just measure one side. I usually do 2 just for insurance, make sure I have my head screwed on straight. Because once you cut the fabric, then you have a different kind of a problem if you're wrong. So, but much better to double check before you cut. So we're going to cut 2 lengths that are 47 inches and we're going to have a 1.5 inch border this time. So I'm going to cut them at 2 inches wide by 47 inches long. Now, most fabric is 42 inches wide. This is width of fabric. If you see WOF, that's what that always means, width of fabric. And different fabrics have slightly different widths, minus the selvage. So it's somewhere in the 42 to 44 range, most bolts are. So how do we get a 47-inch piece? Any ideas?
You measure the material first
Okay.
and see how you could get it to, like, even if it's a 1/4 inch more on one side, then you got to do it on the other side so it can average 47. That's how you have to balance the measurement, right?
In other words, you're going to cut 3 strips
Yeah,
with the fabric by 2 inches.
yeah.
Okay, so we cut 3 strips. We're going to put them together. So you'll trim the selvages off and you'll sew them together, and it's okay to make a vertical seam. So there'll be a vertical seam right about here, right? And so now that you have a long piece, now you cut it. So we've got, let's say it's 44 inches. I've got 2 pieces. I now have an 88-inch piece. Okay, and now I'm going to cut from that very long piece the 47 that I need. Then I'd add that 3rd strip, fold it, cut the 47. Okay, so there's a joint in here, is what I'm saying. To make that length, you've got a joint. You can put them both at the bottom or both at the top, but hopefully it's only obvious to you because you know it's there, but most people won't even notice it.
So I'm sorry, I think
Lori, it's at an angle also. That's why it's odd numbers. When you're doing something straight, the measurement would be different. But when you're putting something in at an angle, it's going to either lose or gain.
I don't usually cut them at an angle here. I usually just go ahead and do a straight joint. And the reason for that is when you're doing the binding, and you're going to double it over, you don't want both those seams to meet each other and be bulky. So by putting the diagonal, when I fold that in half, this joint and this joint are in different places. Okay, so it's less bulky. Here, that's not the issue. So if we have a straight across joint here, it's not a big deal. And I think Janet was going to ask something too.
Oh, I was just, am I on mute?
No, I hear you.
I was just going to say you're cutting one more strip to use as piecing, an amount of piecing to get from the 40, if it's 42 up to the 47 you need.
Right.
That makes so much sense. In my mind, I would have ended up cutting 2 more strips just to keep them consistent. But really all you need is 1 more to add a couple of extra inches, 5, 10 inches.
Exactly. Yeah. So just cut a 3rd strip and you have plenty of length. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to add this strip, but this time I wanted to make it a little bit longer to meet my goal length. And this one I decided to make it wheelchair length, so it's not too long. So for a wheelchair, you don't want too much length of the quilt because it's just going to go from waist to the bottom of the wheelchair foot pads. If it's any longer than that, it's going to get fouled up with the wheels and the floor and so forth. So that's why the wheelchair length is usually a little bit less. So we're going to add a 3-inch border on the ends, and therefore we need to cut what?
3.5.
Good. So we add that 1/2 inch because we're going to lose a 1/2 inch in here. And we'll cut 2 pieces that are 46 by 3.5. 46 by 3.5, which again is probably wider than your width of fabric. So you're going to need a little bit more. And there we are.
Wow. Mazel tov, beautiful.
Cemento.
You come out gorgeous.
Good. Glad you like it.
Hey, did you like that? I hope we never have to go in a wheelchair.
Oh, I know. I hope I have to go away somewhere where no one knows me anymore.
Don't worry, we would love you anyway, but hopefully we never get there. That's right. So,
Claire, did you make that valance behind you?
Me?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It wasn't there last week, was it?
there's a curtain right behind you.
Oh, I changed my curtain.
I love it.
I change my curtains all the time.
And you made it, right?
No,
No.
Christmas tree shop. But I have lace blue curtains. You're not going to believe it. But years ago, I paid $25, maybe about 20 years ago, and the curtains look brand new. I put them on light wash, and then I just let them dry, still wet, on the rod. $25 years ago is a lot of money.
It was.
If you buy quality, they'll have it forever. I have friends that said their curtains came apart. They shredded apart when they put them in water.
The sizing comes out. Yeah, horrible.
Well, no, it's not just the sizing. The material, the sunlight actually deteriorates the material.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So curtains will sometimes do that, especially if they started out sheer and then they deteriorate in the sunlight. They'll do that. They'll just fall apart in the wash.
Well, I guess I was very lucky because it's never happened to me. And they say, how come you have things for so? Well, I treat things like they're delicate. I don't just throw it in the machine.
Yes, that's very important. The other thing is that the fiber content in the material, I would bet that 25 years ago, that had a good bit of rayon fabric in it. They did that for permanent press. To make the permanent press fabric, they used a lot of synthetic in it. And synthetic will last almost forever. It doesn't deteriorate at the same rate that silk and cotton do.
Mm.
Well, I find that the cotton, after you wash and put it in the dryer, like little lint pieces come out of the cotton.
Yes.
It reminds me of cotton candy. When you're eating the candy in the puppy.
Right, as you can see, if that much lint came out of it, that has weakened the fabric.
Yep.
The fabric is no longer as strong. So yeah, we treat it with some delicacy, especially things that are exposed to as much sunlight as curtains. They will eventually wear out, but if you treat them delicately, they'll wear longer, as you've experienced.
Well, it's like treating people too. We'll live longer if we treat each other better.
Very good point.
And Joyce, have you been getting any sleep at all working on our quilt?
Oh, I made a piece I have to show you for the houses quilt. So, and I'm expecting every one of you to make one more piece for the houses quilt, please. It's hard to show you this because with a virtual background, it'll decide it's not human and therefore it should suppress it. But there's a big tree, and look who's under my tree.
A turkey.
A turkey. I haven't embroidered his feet on it or his waddle, so he still needs an eye, but we have a turkey in our neighborhood.
Well, we got plenty of turkeys in Brookline.